All right, welcome to Liquid, New Hampshire. I'm on with gubernatorial candidate Frank Negus Staples. You were running for governor, independent. So my understanding is separate from both the Republican and Democratic parties.
So I put myself on the ballot as a Republican, and I had to because I was still registered as a Republican. I didn't
Hmm.
undeclare after the last time I voted.
Oh, I hate that system.
Yes, I hate that system too. And so I kind of got stuck being on the ballot as a Republican. And I mean, I am very conservative with a lot of my views, but I also have, I'm all over the spectrum.
Hmm.
So yeah, I did that. And I figured get my name out there, get my name on the ballot, get people talking about me and seeing, what I'm about. And I was under no illusions that I was going to win the primary.
Hmm.
So the plan has always been to run as write-in,
Absolutely.
right? And so that's what I'm doing now is continuing on as a write-in. Yeah.
And my understanding is one of the key issues that made you decide to run was the treatment of people at the Sununu Youth Detention Center. I don't know a lot about that story. What was going on there?
So for at least 6 decades, the kids there and in the foster and juvenile justice system
Hmm.
in New Hampshire, because it's not just the Sununu Youth Center, it's like 15, 14 other agencies, Easter Seals, Spalding Youth Center. It was originally there's the Laconia School and all these different things that they keep changing the name because it used to be the Youth Development Center, then they turned it into the Sununu Youth Services Center, and now I don't even know what it is if it's still that. I did hear that they got them all out of
Okay.
the property and they have them at Hampstead Hospital now, from what I
Okay.
understand, because they had so few of them there. But they have documented systematic abuse. I don't know what platform this is going to be on, but
Hmm.
um, SAs, sodomy of these children as young as from 7 to 21,
Hmm.
and some of them are kids that are just in the foster system. Not all of them were juvenile delinquents, but they were having other kids beating up other kids. They had dogs sodomizing kids. There's videos of it
Wow.
and stuff like that. Forcing them to give fellatio and,
Yeah.
and 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 all that, like everything you could think of. And this happened. And what would happen is if reports happened on a staff member, they would send them to a different facility.
Hmm.
And the way that they handled all of the complaints from the children is if they had a sexual abuse history or a trauma history on their file, the ombudsman was told to label it as uncredible. So 95% of these reports from the kids of the abuse
Hmm.
got looked into. I was there in YDC from 96 to 97 when I was 16 to 17.
Okay.
So I experienced it firsthand. How I got involved or kind of sucked into it is a girl that I know. Um, Her sister was a client of mine. She was in my sober house that I was telling you about.
Hmm.
And so she reached out to me and she said her boyfriend was a victim on the lawsuits.
Hmm.
The arrest had already happened at this point and all that. And so she asked if I would interview him on my YouTube because I have, almost 20,000 subscribers and try to get the word out about it. I said, sure, yeah, no problem. And then I did a couple other interviews, people contacting me. I created the YDC Victims Advocate Facebook page,
Okay.
and we started hosting different types of events. And I was coordinating with people that I know who are on the lawsuit. John Doe number 9, he's doing life in prison, and other people. So I'm coordinating this stuff from some of the other victims.
Okay.
Had a bunch of speaking events, family members. A bunch of them have passed away through. It's been 2 years since we started doing this. Some of them have passed away in prison. Some of them have passed away out here on the streets from random things, drug
Mm.
drug overdoses and strokes and all kinds of stuff. but we asked for a independent investigation from the federal government.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with that is that would be Jane Young is the U.S. attorney, and she was actually the attorney general at one point, just like Kelly Ayotte was,
Okay.
and the abuse was happening throughout their terms,
Okay.
and nothing has happened. No one knows where the failures in the chain of command lie.
Mm-hmm.
I asked Ayotte and Morris at an event. I don't know if you saw that video. It's on my YouTube. Where what are they going to do about the inevitable bankruptcy of the state from this thing? The first civil judgment came down, 38 million. There's 1,400 other, victims. It's over 2,000 victims. So let's put this into perspective. Over 2,000 children.
The court ruled in favor. So there's clear evidence that something happened.
And they've set aside $100 million settlement fund, which has been depleted. Then they put in another 60 million to bump it up to 160 million, plus that 38 million, because the settlement fund is for victims that are settling out of court, and they're getting, I know one that just got 2.2 million lump sum, boom.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the financial impact of it, if the abuse that happened isn't enough for you to want to know, and the taxpayer is footing the bill here.
Right.
That's what people don't realize. You should want to know, just for the sake of understanding how these millions of dollars are now being taken out of your taxes, and all your property taxes and things are probably going to have to go up under the new leadership, because Kelly Ayotte is coming in to cover the whole thing up and continue keeping her, she had admitted to negligence. When I asked her the question, she said, we didn't know, I didn't know. So she also implicated everyone underneath her as not knowing anything.
Right.
How is that possible?
Yeah. So it's an incompetence that is now also costing the taxpayer. So
millions.
What would you do as governor to somehow, simultaneously help the victims and do justice for the victims without overburdening the taxpayer?
So a special prosecutor, we need a lot more lawyers on the case as well. I attended a couple hearings, and the judge was like, we don't have enough judges, and we don't have enough lawyers to represent. He said, if we continue with the amount that we have to do this, it'll take over a decade to get through all these cases, and so my plan is a comprehensive investigation to find out where these failures in the chain of command lie, with a special prosecutor, an investigator, with open boards that are looking into this thing independently and openly, so the public can see actually what happened and how this happened.
Right.
And that is on my website. I can't remember it all. There's a whole lot to it. But it's all lined out in my comprehensive plan to, investigate it. And nobody else has a plan.
Yeah.
They all admit this is horrible. Can't happen again. It's not going to happen again. How? None of them have a plan. Chuck Morris didn't have a plan. Kelly Ayotte certainly doesn't have a plan. She's calling it a conspiracy theory. She called me out by name during the GOP debate when Chuck Morris literally took my platform. Okay, he had his campaign people attending some of our rallies at the State House.
Okay.
He was supposed to show up. In the last one, he was supposed to speak. He was invited to speak at any one of them, and he didn't show up. But his people were always there taking notes, taking some video here and there, but they never used it. He waited till the very end, deep into the race, to call her out during the debate, because he knew he had been losing. And I had told his campaign, you guys need to get on this now if you don't want to hemorrhage votes and support. And, he jumped on it too late. And he used our same exact language when he called her out prior to the debate. I don't know if you saw that public statement that he did. Complicit. He called her complicit.
Okay.
Our event was called Ayotte was complicit. We had signs made up. Okay.
So he just borrowed.
He literally totally stole it. And then she acknowledges and says, "Oh, that was a conspiracy theory raised by Frank Staples."
Mm.
You know, and
Yeah.
and people are saying that I don't have the name recognition to do this.
Mhm.
The only reason I don't is because she's owned by the media. The same people that are donating to her campaign own the media.
Mhm.
You know, iHeartRadio and all this. There's all kinds of ties there with the funding, and they're never gonna give someone like me an opportunity like you are here.
Mm. Absolutely. So moving on to some of the other issues on your platform, I also saw in your tax plan, I saw a 10% tax on what was it? It was war.
Call it the war tax.
Yeah.
People said you're going to get killed over this. I said, it's already out there. Other people can take the idea, so you can't kill an idea, right?
Mm.
And the war tax is a 10% tax
Mm-hmm.
on government contractors that make more than 50% of their revenue, gross revenue, from producing weapons of war and their derivatives.
Yeah.
Okay, so that breaks down to about $1 billion a year and escalate. Look at what's happening. I've been saying, I mean, it's been getting worse and worse and worse, and I've been saying it this whole time. And now with this Iran, Israel, Ukraine thing going on,
Mm-hmm.
we can see that this is just going to escalate further.
Yeah.
And people need to make the connection that the devaluing of the dollar through inflation is from the money printing when we send these packages over to the Ukraine and Israel and all that, right? All that money gets taken out of the value of the dollars in your pocket. And once you realize that, we have to take some drastic measures where this ties into the whole going back to the gold standard so we can benefit from all this inflation that happened. But the war tax, that is about $1 billion a year, probably going to be a lot more. And we use 2/3 of it, 66%, to lower all of the existing taxes, eliminate some of the lower level stupid things, and lower the property tax a lot. It's substantial. The number, when you look at the numbers in the plan, it's on my website. It's about 30 to 40% that it'll lower the property tax. Okay. And then the business enterprise tax, business profits tax, all that stuff, because we do have taxes here, right? Then we still have money left over. We still have a third, $300,000 that goes into the state, 300 million, sorry, that goes into the state coffers that we can use for things like the Granite Bucks, for the New Hampshire Energy Independence Program, where I propose to expand into hydroelectric and small nuclear stations.
Yeah.
And we need to focus on New Hampshire. I see everyone is so distracted with the presidential race. They don't understand that the governor of New Hampshire is more powerful than the president of the United States.
I completely agree.
New Hampshire people especially.
People are in a mentality where national politics is everything, and I think the media keeps them focused in that way. It's attention grabbing. It's the number one point of conversation is always the presidential election. Maybe you get some federal Congress coverage. You don't get much coverage at all of state and local issues.
None.
And when, again, like you
if
said,
you do, it's watered down with you got Ayotte and you got the straw man. People propped up Chuck Norris to make it look like there was some sort of competition, and they did the same thing on the other side.
Joyce Craig and Cindy Warmington, the exact same situation.
Yeah, and I actually like Cindy Warmington.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I do know that she was a lobbyist for Purdue Pharma, which I'm not a fan of, but she has done some things on the executive council that I think speak well of her.
And she's learned a lot, I believe, through the COVID thing. And I've had emails with her. We heard that she was a swing vote, and a bunch of us sent emails. I sent one to her. How for the federal funding that 9 of us got arrested over at the executive council meeting, and she did vote no. They did vote no, but for anyone following that, you need to understand we don't know who really voted no for the right reason
Okay.
and who voted no because they knew that there was a plan.
Mm.
Because Chuck Morse told one of my intelligence operatives
Okay.
that they want to know who it is, but I'm not revealing who it is. But they said, "What are you guys going to do now that the money got voted down?" He said, "Don't worry, we have a plan." And that plan turned out to be November 19th, because that happened October 13th. November 19th, they had a fiscal committee meeting where Chuck Morse sat on that, and they accepted the 27 million that was rejected by the executive council. So what is the point of having an executive council if it can just be end around and they know how all this stuff works? Right? So, and I talked to Chuck Morse about it. He said, "Oh, we didn't know, but now we know." And then, it's like, well, I knew. I testified before the House on the risks of myocarditis and pericarditis. It's right there. It's all public, And how did I know? How did I have all these medical studies that I shared and I gave to them, and then they just don't look at it all?
It did seem like an odd choice. I mean, 4 Republicans, 1 Democrat on the board, to make a reversal of that decision, right? My understanding is they voted, I think, unanimously no, only to then switch back around and get a majority in support later.
Yep.
I wonder what could have changed their mind.
That's the question, and that's what I've been telling people to ask Chuck Morse. And of course, they thought he could maybe be this dark horse candidate or something. And that's the other thing we need to remember here is less than 30% of the people turned out for the primary. So it's like 15% on each side, give or take. And we still have 70% of the people who are undecided. That's why they didn't come out, because they look at the choices and they don't want to have anything to do with it. So we can 100% win this write-in campaign. We don't have to wait till 2026 when I have this supposed name recognition.
Most people are independents.
Right.
That actually raises a question I wanted to ask you. One issue that I've talked about with lots of the people I've had on as guests is ranked choice voting, because I find that across the political spectrum, when you have people who are outsiders who run their campaigns, they want ranked choice voting to give them a better chance to succeed. Do you support ranked choice voting?
I do. I wrote an article about it and about the two-party system and how it's unfair and it's actually against the state constitution. So, and part of that is going to ranked choice voting. Yes, 100%. I say I like this guy first, and then they get a certain amount of points. That person last, whether it's 1 to 3, 1 to 5, however many. Maybe there's 7 people running.
Yeah.
Let them all run. Who cares? It's ranked choice. Then you really get to see, the outcome of things with people. They have a lot more options, and it's not just having to pick between 2 poisons, the lesser of 2 evils.
Yeah.
That's what it always is. Now it's like these people that hate, my Republican friends that hate Ayotte, they're going to vote for her.
Yeah.
Just because they won't vote for the Democrat and there's no other option. You have 2 poisons, and it's always going to be that way until we change, this 2-party system, 100%.
And I found it's something that I can get almost anyone to agree with as long as they're not an incumbent politician, because whether it's far left, far right, or people who think both parties have gone too far and they're sort of in the center, everybody benefits from being able to vote with their hearts.
Right. Yeah, 100%. Otherwise, you get to this whole wasted vote syndrome. I'm not going to vote because you're not going to win. And, it does change things. And that's what people don't understand is when you do vote for the outside candidate and they do get a bunch of votes, it sends a shot across the bow to the other 2 parties that they have, and then they will respond and they will change because they see they're losing a share of the votes.
Right.
If they don't see that, they're not going to change. So it's up to us to step away from this system and to do it differently. The write-in thing, I know people are very frustrated, and that's another reason why this write-in is great. I think,
Hmm.
you know.
Oh, you mentioned earlier the program, the Granite Bucks proposal.
Yes.
I'm a big fan of complementary currencies and alternative currencies. I actually, when I ran for state representative, I had run my campaign. One of my key issues was going to be complementary currencies, but I couldn't figure out what the policy really would be, as opposed to just starting a complementary currency in the neighborhood. What will you do policy wise for alternative currencies?
So I think we need a state bank
Hmm.
and also a state-run cryptocurrency exchange,
Okay.
international cryptocurrency exchange. And so the Granite Bucks with the state bank, we would start, buying gold and silver,
Hmm.
and then we would print these notes, the Granite Bucks. Let's say a gram. We can have gram notes of gold and silver.
Hmm.
We can have copper, platinum. We can expand to other things, and I also propose nuclear notes.
Okay.
And so all the notes are redeemable except the nuclear notes,
Hmm.
right? But the nuclear notes, a gram of nuclear material is a lot of money,
Okay.
right? So you can still get exposure to that market.
Hmm.
So the notes, like the gold and silver notes, they will be redeemable for New Hampshire citizens, no tax, and there's a 5% tax or fee on any out-of-staters, non-residents who want to redeem it. And so
Mm.
you'll have people coming here to go on vacation, and I mean they'll be they'll be able to be used all anywhere,
Hmm.
right? As long as we have a strong system that is, has a reputation, and people know they can go boom, and maybe they keep them and they come back with them to spend them the next time they're there on
Hmm.
vacation. You'll have a lot of that going on too, right? So not only will it be a separate income stream for the state, but it will also allow us to fight inflation. This will all be accepted for, tax purposes and fees and
Hmm.
fines. We can immediately go to the goldback system,
Hmm.
right? If anybody knows about goldbacks, go to goldback.com. They're actual physical gold.
Hmm.
I'm proposing not actual physical gold because there's all kinds of problems with that. And the fractionalization of it, we can just fractionalize it without having to shoot it with a laser and atomize it and all this stuff
Hmm.
to create the gold, that physical gold note, which are all different sizes, and it gets a little clunky.
Right.
So those notes will be backed, of course, by the physical metal. And UPMA with the gold backs, they already have a state banking system set up.
Okay.
So we can jump right into their system and maybe work with them to expand it to other things, maybe even add cryptocurrency in there,
Hmm.
right? They have a debit card that you pay for. And it's $10 for the debit card. And then you have your gold backs and your silver eagles and your gold eagles. Maybe we can expand it to actual bullion, just
Hmm.
gold bullion and silver bullion. And how it works now is you can spend from that account from your debit card,
Okay.
right? So that's another way of having your money into metals. And then as they inflate and these wars happen,
Hmm.
the value of the metals goes up, which means the value of your holdings goes up and you're not losing it, because that's the only way you can fight inflation
Hmm.
is through precious metals, in my opinion.
And that means a stronger local economy for New Hampshire specifically,
Yes, big
because
time.
we'll have an advantage over the rest of the country
Big
that
time.
no one else has.
People will be able to spend. I mean, in a couple months, it's up, 20, your
Hmm.
value is worth, 25% more in 90 days.
Hmm.
I mean, gold is just skyrocketing, and some of the prices on gold and silver that they're saying, it's ridiculous. But yeah, it would be a hedge and a protection. You could have your paychecks automatically converted into
Hmm.
it, and you could have a debit card that you get from the state bank, and you don't even have to have the notes themselves, but we could make the notes. I also propose a state mint,
Hmm.
where we mint official New Hampshire coinage
Okay.
that is limited runs, and we can get into the collectible coin market, and that'll
Okay.
be like the US Mint is minting silver eagles
Mm-hmm.
and then selling them for $95. It's an ounce of silver.
Oh yeah.
We could be doing the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some historical, New Hampshire coinage that we could replicate and do a reissue of.
Okay.
And those things, the profit margin is pretty substantial in the collectible coin market. So the state needs to be run like a business.
Mm-hmm.
We need to think about all that type of stuff. Another thing is it's funny because JD Vance, during the vice presidential debate, he brought up how Trump was talking about seizing federal land.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know too much about it other than what he said during the debate, but I proposed to take back the White Mountain National Forest
Okay.
through eminent domain back into New Hampshire control. And then we can use that for housing, tourism, cut down the trees and sell them ourselves and do what we want with them. I mean, we had the pine tree riots. Why are we letting the feds now all of a sudden take all our pine trees?
What were the pine tree riots? I haven't heard of that before.
Pine tree riots, 1772, pre-Revolutionary War.
Okay.
The king was marking tall white pines with some sort of, mark and he was trying to claim them for shipbuilding.
Mm-hmm.
And people were like, these are my trees. You know what I mean? No, what the fuck is going on? So there was very violent, bloody riots from that. And that's where the Appeal to Heaven flag came from with the pine tree.
Okay. Yes,
Yeah.
I am aware of that flag.
Yes. So that's where the history of that flag originated.
Okay.
Here in New Hampshire. And so, yeah, I think taking control of it's 13% of New Hampshire land is White Mountain National Forest.
Oh, wow.
Then we can also use that for some of these hydroelectric powers, which is how we could, have the reason to take control of it and manage it ourselves. Why can't we manage it ourselves? Right? We can have our own border patrol unit and all and stuff like that. So I am 100% about the state constitution, state sovereignty, the right to revolution. It's all built in there. That does not mean violent revolution. It means through a process. And what you need to do that is a governor that understands how the state constitution functions, because that's where his powers come from. And that's what he's supposed to enforce as the chief law enforcement officer, the real chief law enforcement officer.
So what has been preventing us from having sort of state sovereignty? Is the New Hampshire Supreme Court striking down sovereignty, or is it just not even getting through the governor?
No. So it's interesting because there's a case I have right now on appeal that raises, I was arrested with a state rep for recording in the federal court lobby.
Yeah, it was Therese Bastarach. Is that how
No,
you say her name?
that was the New Hampshire 9 arrest.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I went to Ian Freeman's Bitcoin sentencing.
Okay.
And there was probably 150 people there, easy. And myself and Jason Gerhard, state rep well, he's state rep for now, but he ran for sheriff. He didn't make it, so he's not going to be a rep for much longer. But we recorded in the lobby, and we got arrested for recording in the lobby.
Okay.
And we were found guilty. And one of the issues I'm raising on appeal is that it wasn't federal property, because the first element is that it happened on federal property. And I'm saying it's not federal property because of a state law called RSA 123.1, and that's about ceding jurisdiction to the federal government and how the federal government gets jurisdiction from New Hampshire with New Hampshire property. So it specifically names military bases, courthouses, post offices, etc. And so there's a process for them to follow to get jurisdiction, and they have to give an accurate description of the lands and what they're going to do with it to the Secretary of State. The Secretary of State has to agree to it, and then it goes on the record, and they get concurrent jurisdiction. Otherwise, it's exclusive New Hampshire jurisdiction. And so I had the Secretary of State search the archives, and there is no documentation of the federal government since 1886 that this has been on the record.
Okay.
This law, that they've complied with it. They have never complied with it, not once,
Mm-hmm.
ever. So they don't have jurisdiction. And there's one New Hampshire Supreme Court case that touches on it, because not only is that how they get jurisdiction, but that's also how they get tax exemption.
Okay.
The same law governs tax exemption for these same properties. And some of the properties that they use is the national forest that they cut down. They supposedly conserve it, but they actually log it, and they cut down certain parts of it, and then they do whatever they want with it. And so they had this Campanella Construction Company in Newington, New Hampshire, cutting down these trees, and they were like, you can burn them or you can take them. And so the guy took a bunch of the wood, okay, and then they wanted to tax him on it. And he said, no, because of this 123.1, it says I'm not taxable, it's federal property, blah, blah, blah. New Hampshire court said, no, the federal government has never complied. They've never accepted our offer of cession. This is the only case law. This one case is the only one that talks about 123.1. They said they've never accepted our offer of secession or session, and now, so therefore it's all New Hampshire territory, and you owe us the taxes. So the guy ended up having to pay the taxes. But that shows that if they don't have tax exemption, they didn't have jurisdiction because they didn't follow that law, which means if they didn't follow the law at the federal courthouse, they don't have jurisdiction.
Okay. So to be clear, the only thing necessary is to have the right people in power on the state level. The federal government cannot override.
Correct. And you would need a captain of the ship who's not going to bend and who knows how to cite these things from the state constitution and the RSAs.
Okay.
And say, hey, no, you guys aren't even abiding by this. They also owe us back taxes. They owe us back taxes on all these properties. So that case on that 123.1 is on appeal right now. We'll see what they say. I asked for a declaratory judgment on it. Yeah, and it should be interesting.
So how do other Republicans in New Hampshire's state courts and New Hampshire's governor office in the past, how have they handled the issue of states' rights, state sovereignty? Do you think
they haven't at all. They talk about the United States Constitution. They talk about federal laws in the United States Constitution. You hear all these, candidates talking about 2A, Second Amendment, Second Amendment, First Amendment. Well, it's Article 22, free speech here in New Hampshire, and it's Article 2A is our Second Amendment rights, right?
Okay.
It's the right to bear arms under Article 2A, New Hampshire, is much broader and more protective and expansive than the United States Second Amendment. So the Article 2A says you have the right to bear arms in defense of yourself, your family, your property, and the state. Nothing about a militia or anything like that. And so it's funny because I don't know if you saw the article from Laconia where I heckled AOT.
Oh, I haven't.
Okay, so I got removed from an event for supposedly heckling AOT. And it was an event hosted by Mike Bordes, who's the guy who endorsed her, big supporter of hers. The crowd was, overwhelmingly her gang. It was like 80% of them. And they were throughout, because she spoke last, which allowed her to listen and change her stuff. And that was the first event that I actually was able to speak with her, right?
Okay.
And so I got 10 minutes. Another guy, Sean Fife, got 10 minutes. Chuck Morris got 10 minutes. She got 10 minutes. And I was up there talking about the state constitution and citing it and saying how none of these politicians know about it and they never talk about it. They're always referencing the United States Constitution, Second Amendment, all that stuff, right? She gets up there and she says something about the Constitution, and then she said, and the New Hampshire Constitution, but she wasn't she didn't have anything, but she had to throw it in there.
Incorporated it after the fact so that it seemed like she was subsuming you in a way.
Exactly. And I had been at plenty of events where she did speak, where I was not allowed to speak, where she never has mentioned it. And now this is the first time. And so that's what I said. I said, oh, that's the first time we're hearing that. And then I was swiftly asked to leave, and I did.
The people on the left I've talked to on this podcast say the same exact things when it comes to the primaries and the media coverage leading up to them and the organizations, right? It's one thing for the media to initially assume the major candidates. It's another thing when they're reached out to by alternative candidates who are literally showing up to the events, showing up in person saying, I would like to speak at this event, and people are saying,
Nope.
nope, we're just talking to the major candidates.
Mm-hmm. Did you see? That's what happened to me at the GOP debate.
Yeah.
Yeah, I showed up with Sean Fife, and we were both denied access. It's a 20-minute video. I have it in on my YouTube. And what's his name there? Chris Ager is the chairman of the GOP.
Okay.
He comes out. This is billed as a GOP primary debate hosted by New Hampshire Journal and at the St. Anselm College.
Yep.
Right. And so it's literally, it says GOP debate all over it, which in their bylaws say that everybody has to be included. So we showed up, and he said, oh, no, yeah, no, it's a private event. Oh, it's a private event. You guys, you want the government telling private people what to do? I said, well, like, you think the private corporations should be able to buy and pay for candidates? Oh, no, that's not what I'm saying. I said, it sounds like that's what you're saying. And so he's saying, oh, I wasn't even invited. It's like, you just came out of the building. You're here. Oh, it was last minute. Oh, so you were invited. It is billed as a GOP event. And she ended up slandering me during the debate. So I show that part where her and Chuck Morris are talking about education freedom accounts. She calls him spineless. That's when he reacts with the YDC stuff, calls her out on that. And then she says, oh, that's a conspiracy theory raised by Frank Staples at this. She literally names the date, June 21st in Chester. So then I cut to that in the video and show the full context of the question that I asked and her response saying, we didn't know, nobody knew, and about the YDC thing. And then I cut back. And so where's the conspiracy? There's no conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
It's a fact, and she admitted to the negligence, and negligence is not a defense.
Our court has admitted to it, right?
The courts have admitted to it.
One plaintiff has been found deserving of recompense.
And all the ones that, I mean, the state has settled all these millions, hundreds of millions. Right? So they obviously agree as well. And that's why they want to do these settlement funds is much cheaper and quieter. Because once you settle, you can't talk about it.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
That's what we always do to the victims of these sorts of things, right? We want to settle them and just get them out of the way as quickly as possible.
So another thing about that, an interesting thing to note is David Vincenzo.
I don't know the name.
He worked for the U.S. Department of Justice. He is friends with Kelly Ayotte.
Okay.
They endorsed each other at different points, and he was a prosecutor, and he was also a defense attorney. And so he actually defended the Catholic priests in the Catholic priest scandal.
Oh, wow.
He defended them, and she was prosecuting them.
Yeah.
And now he's defending the victims on the YDC case.
Wow. That is as direct as it gets right there. How could anybody, like atheists on the left and so on, who make the joke about the Catholic priests, how could they not also support this on the same vein?
Right. And one of the Catholic priests was a chaplain at YDC.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
So it's literally it's
there's like all these
scandal.
These two of the biggest sex scandals in the history of the United States have this nexus with Kelly Ayotte and Vincenzo. And it's not like I'm here. I was never here to go after Kelly Ayotte. She presented herself. I always was doing this YDC stuff, Sununu Youth Center, whatever. To shine a light on it and make it a key election issue. That was my goal for this election. And it turned out to work pretty well, I think. It was raised during the debate and everything. So the left should be attacking her on all this right now. But she came out of nowhere after I had already been in with all this, and she said, "I'm running for governor." And we said, "Wait a second." She was AG during all the time of this abuse when the Disability Rights Center was doing all their investigations, and she's claiming that she didn't know anything.
Mm-hmm.
It's impossible.
Mm.
And if that's possible, how is that possible?
Mm.
They were doing FOIA requests and all that stuff to do these, reports that came out in 2008 and 2009, and she, was AG from 2004 to 2009.
Right.
She had to have known. People in her, someone had to have known, and she's claiming nobody knew.
Yeah.
So it totally contradicts, why is she running? That's the real question that we need to be asking ourselves is, why is she running? And look at her financial incentives and where her money is. Like, the governor job pays what, like $200,000 a year?
Mm.
She makes $99,000 a year and change just from sitting on the board of Caterpillar.
Okay.
She makes $240,000 at Boston Properties. We don't know what she was getting from BAE Systems. They've scrubbed her page, and you can't find out any financial information about her ties to BAE. There have been reports of her getting stock that she's selling, then funding her campaign with it.
Wow.
Okay. And so people talk about her ties to Boston Property and the rising housing costs, which is true. That's partially true. But again, we need to look back into the inflation aspect of it. So the rent control, the not rent controls, but where these housing developments happen and who gets the contracts to build is a part of it, right? In the red tape involved. But the inflation from the money printing and the war machine, which she is also tied to.
Right.
BAE is like the biggest contractor. They subcontract to the 1,800 other contracting.
And the amount of influence they have here in New Hampshire specifically, I think there was a Raytheon in New Hampshire as well.
Yes.
There's so many different weapons manufacturers. I know people who work for weapons manufacturers because I know people in New Hampshire who've gotten engineering degrees, and that's where the jobs are here right now. And I love that 10% tax on military contractors, because I think that could free up some of my personal friends who want to be engineers but don't want to work as weapons manufacturers.
They can work on hydroelectric and nuclear stuff.
There you go.
That's where the people are like, oh, you're going to be destroying jobs. No, they're going to get their money. They make so much money with this industry. Maybe they get a little bit of a pay cut, but other industries are going to want to come in, and people are going to start investing in other industries that are going to make us truly free and energy independent in the best state in the world. We go back to a gold state. I mean, think about it. It's just like a no-brainer to me. How do I shouldn't have to like twist someone's arm for this. I know I'm not twisting yours, but look at the stuff that I'm talking about, and who's the better candidate?
And that's a great segue too to your educational policy. You talked about getting people into STEM programs. Could you tell me a little bit about that?
Sure. So New Hampshire Article 83, Part 2, Article 83, is one of the bigger parts of the state constitution, and it covers education and monopolies, and that's actually how I would attack the two-party system. They're monopolies, political monopolies, and monetary monopolies at this point, with the funding and all of that with the candidates. But for the STEM, the Article 83 promotes literature and sciences and trades, right? And that's what our school system should be doing. It should be building people up, giving them skills to be able to do things. I mean, balance a checkbook, for Christ's sake, a budget, weekly budget, very simple things that need to be the core of our education system, right? So that needs to be revamped, and funding should only be going to things that are in line with Article 83, which provides for public education.
Hmm. I'm somebody who went to college and dropped out, and now I'm working entry level jobs at the moment, right? So having had that experience, I find I'm pretty critical of the way our education system doesn't prepare you for a normal job so much. And we definitely don't have enough opportunities for someone like me who's very good at learning if I'm just doing it. Like, just put me next to a car and show me how to repair something, and I'll do it all day for a week, and then I know how to do it.
Yeah.
Right? And that kind of opportunity doesn't happen in college. In college, you're studying in the abstract for years at a time before you go off to do it. By the time you go to do it, you've forgotten what you learned in your first year of college.
Hmm. Yeah, it's definitely, you know, the manufacturing jobs are going to have to come back as well. So people
Mm-hmm.
are going to have to adjust. You can't have all these liberal art degrees
Mm.
and do what? Like, I'm a
Yeah.
philosopher,
Yeah.
but say I went to college and got a degree in philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
What is that going to do for me if I'm not applying it
I'll tell
to?
you what it'll do. It'll get you a job teaching philosophy.
Yeah, yeah. you know. So, but how many of those are available, right? You
Exactly.
can't have a bazillion philosophers. You can't have a bazillion, of these, what are the gender
Mm-hmm.
study degrees and stuff like that. Climate change,
Mm.
that whole thing,
And
is.
it's so many of the journal articles. I was just watching a critic of higher education talking about research at these universities, right? And he was talking about the amount of research that goes into. I think it was Wagner, a musician, right? And he said, we're calling it research, and you're picturing like serious student scientists doing serious work. He goes, there's been like 7,000 papers written on Wagner. He's like, we don't need that many papers written on Wagner. He's like, I love Wagner. Don't get me wrong, he's good enough. We don't need that many papers written about him. There's not that much to say about this guy.
Right. I mean, how different can they be? Um, you know.
And that's the same thing with those other degrees too. I completely agree that degrees in humanities, as much as I do want more people to learn humanities and learn philosophy, I don't believe that there's going to have that many jobs for them, and I don't know that there's that many, like with a gender studies degree, how many different things could be said.
Right.
Yeah.
I've actually I haven't published this yet. I've been caught up with so many different things, and I don't like the topic
Mm-hmm.
because it's so divisive,
Mm.
and I think they use it intentionally to divide us with a lot of these, political footballs, I call them.
Absolutely.
But I was at the soccer game with the pink armband thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I was there wearing the pink armbands, and I talked to one of the reporters there, and the issue, I understand what the problem is.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem is that we're conflating two different terms,
Mm-hmm.
sex and gender.
Mm-hmm.
They're not interchangeable.
Mm.
And we're using them interchangeably. And that's where the problem lies. When you separate them, the left is correct.
Mm-hmm.
Gender is a fluid mental state.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But sex is not gender.
Mm.
Sex is determined by your genetics
Mm-hmm.
and your chromosomes, whatever they may be, and it's not mutable.
Mm-hmm.
Gender, a man can be masculine or feminine
Mm-hmm.
in different circumstances, and vice versa,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, yes, you have a fluid mental state where you go into these, it's a full spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody might be all the time masculine 99% of the time, maybe 100% of the time.
Right, right.
You know what I mean? And somebody might be able to, when they're around children or with pets or with, you're going to be a little bit more caring. And when you have friends over, you're going to, be feminine. You're going to, oh, do you want a drink? Oh,
Mm-hmm.
can I do something for you? Those are feminine characteristics, right? And so when we separate the terms and look at it that way, we can have a discussion on the other issues with, like, the medical industry profiting off of the
Right.
treatments.
Mm-hmm.
And
Once we've established some kind of a terms of conversation,
right.
then we can have a conversation. And I'm actually probably just assuming the pink armbands are a Save Women's Sports armband, we're probably on opposite sides of that issue. But I actually agree with you that the gender studies degrees, for example, are useless.
Mhm.
So there are points of agreements once you have that framework for conversation.
Right. And they say, well, let kids be. What about the argument, let kids be kids? And it's like, well, yeah, let the kids be kids. And are you going to let adults play in the 8 to 12-year-old category?
Mm.
No, you're not. So
Right,
why are you
right.
going to let boys play?
Mm-hmm.
Have a co-ed league.
Mm.
Have a transgender league. I understand that, that's not feasible because there's not enough of them.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't, you can't break the rules.
Mm-hmm.
No one has a right to play sports,
Mm.
is what I think it boils down to.
Mm-hmm.
No one has a right to play sports. I don't have a right to play sports. I have to try out.
Mm-hmm.
I have to pass all these physical fitness tests. I have to have a certain, fit at age category. Right. Then it's broken down into sex and all these different things. Your mental gender shouldn't have anything to do with any of it. And you shouldn't also be using your mental gender to mutilate yourself.
Mm.
You know what I mean? In my opinion.
With the sports, I think my position would be that we need more co-ed, right? Because that kind of pragmatically solves
Sure.
if we're going in that direction anyways, kind of
It's a
pragmatically
free market.
solves the problem.
I mean, you do a co-ed team, and then who knows? Maybe most of the girls and the boys want to play on a co-ed team together. You never know. Or
Right.
maybe maybe they won't.
Mm-hmm.
And they should be able to decide. Let the kids decide. Let the kids be kids.
Mm-hmm.
Don't force them to be in these weird, uncomfortable situations where you're trying to the whole bathroom, locker room thing and all that stuff. It's like,
and I do think that's what a lot of people want on both sides of the aisle, is to have the state and the federal government get out of these issues and to have it be the schools themselves on a more localized level making these decisions. What's right for your community? What's
and
right for your
learn from what's going on. And here's I've call out the left all the time on this on Twitter, and I'm like, where's your lawsuit? Where is your lawsuit if you're losing all these rights? And what rights tell me what are trans rights? Because there are just human rights. There are human rights. There's no extra trans rights for people who, I get to break all these rules that everybody else is expected to follow and all these social norms. I get a free pass on all this stuff. That's what's bullying, in my opinion, is trying to force all that stuff on people.
And I do want to circle back also to the STEM education.
Yeah.
Because I do have some criticism of STEM programs. I'm not a fan, like I said before, of the college pathway a lot of the time. And a lot of times STEM not only is putting more kids on the college path as opposed to some of the more trade routes, but also it means that our high schools tend to prepare. I'm reading a book right now called The Math Myth, and one of his core arguments is that this big push to get people into STEM has meant a justification for teaching higher algebra and stuff in high school. And I think most ordinary people would agree that we don't really need to be factoring trinomials. Like most adults in their working life don't need the math that they learned in school.
Yeah, I mean, I think math is important because it gives you a certain logical foundation. And like I look at, language as also mathematical. Like with the definition thing and how with the sex and the gender, right? There's an words, when you have a definitive definition, they act in a mathematical function and they equal something that's either coherent or incoherent. It's just like with computer programming and AI, right? It's garbage in, garbage out. And that's how like a chat GPT model works. It turns all these words into numbers, right? And gives them a certain value and equation that they then can spit out these documents for you. And so I do think it's helpful for people to learn the higher order mathematics, to get their brain thinking more logically and critically. but you know, it's not for everybody.
Right.
And yeah, you know, it's not for everybody. That's part of the problem, is that, you know, understanding the world, you can't make accurate decisions or effective decisions without accurate information
Mm-hmm.
on the past and the present and what's going on. And that's why they try to keep us dumbed down, and, you know, wanting to just turn away from everything and go into our little bubble and not learn and not understand what's really happening, because it gets you in arguments with everybody. Like I said,
Mm-hmm.
I got the libertarians arguing with me, I got
Mm-hmm.
the right and the left arguing with me. Everybody, they can agree with me on some things, but then these other things they want to say, no, it's got to
Yeah.
be this way. And
Just looking at your platform, I mean, there is something for every major political group to take issue with.
yeah,
And I
yeah.
mean that as a huge compliment,
I-
genuinely.
yeah, I appreciate, and that, I mean, that means that other part, like, they can agree there, but yeah, and I think they create these political footballs,
Mm-hmm.
and then they, you know, I think they're puppets. They're puppet masters with all these different parties, and they say, oh, here's your football, here's your football, and team on all these issues, right? You're on this team, you're on that team, and it keeps everybody divided, because it's like, well, what if I like that team over there and they're not part of, like, the Republican side, the
Mm-hmm.
Republican League, right? And then the Democrat League. Oh no, that's not one of our teams of these political footballs. You
Mm-hmm.
have to be on all the same team of all these different footballs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
That's actually what my last guest, Max Abramson, said in his experience in Congress on the federal level. The Democrats vote uniformly Democrat, the Republicans vote uniformly Republican, and the people he talks to, he literally just looks to see if they had even a single vote different from the party leadership. And he goes, "You're my person. Whoever you are, you're my person."
right, right. Yeah, yeah, it's crazy. You know, it's a machine, and it's very robotic what people are doing.
Mm.
Like I was saying, how they're just getting fed these bills. They're not thinking critically. They're like, oh
Yeah.
no, all team, we're gonna vote all red, all blue.
The size of the bills, the legalistic language makes it inaccessible
Hmm.
for any normal person who enters government. And then you get these people like the American Legislative Executive Council coming in saying, "Oh, hey, I can explain what this bill says, and it's wonderful. Don't even read it. Don't even worry about
Right,
it."
right. Yep, yep. All the lobbyists. It's another thing we gotta, you know, I think have to do something about
Mm.
and get rid of. But yeah, there's, you know, there's a lot of work to do, and it's not going to get done by people who aren't motivated and
Mhm.
you know, thinking outside the box.
Oh, so a key issue I wanted to ask you about as well was homelessness, because I know you said you actually started one of the protests that I've gone to
Hmm.
against the sweeps here in Manchester, which, judging from the fact that most of our candidates seem to support those sweeps regardless of
Yep.
party, that's a huge win for me.
Yes. So I was at the Lebanon Senior Center last week, and I brought this up, how both sides are supporting these roundups.
Mm-hmm.
And initially, when I did that protest for the homeless people and stuff, like I said, I have a lot of Republican conservative friends, and they're
Mm-hmm.
some of the worst. And then these libertarians as
Mm-hmm.
well. Like, you know, the logic that they use, it's like, what next? Throw them into ovens?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's what you're proposing
Mm-hmm.
with this route. They can't be anywhere. They're not allowed to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
They can't exist. And a lot of them have severe persistent mental illness. I know
Mm-hmm.
this for a fact. I worked at Manchester Mental Health.
Yeah, absolutely.
I worked on the ACT team, which was dual diagnosed clients with severe persistent mental illness
Mm-hmm.
and drug problems. And like, you know, I've walked around Manchester, and I know most of the homeless people are former clients of mine,
Mm-hmm.
and and then other ones that I don't know, I'll sit there, you talk to them for a little bit, and they're just off their medication,
Mm.
delusional, saying all kinds of stuff nonstop that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And these people, what are you going to do with them? What are we going to do with them? Well, they have to be able to exist somewhere, and you can blame the state for eliminating hundreds of beds at the state hospital.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That the bed shortage was a big problem. I actually worked at a shelter for a brief period of time, about 4 months, and a lot of people, when they support these sweeps on the homeless, they say, well, why aren't they staying in the shelter? Why aren't they staying where they
There's
should be?
not room, and a lot of them are banned from the shelter. It's a
Mm-hmm.
private shelter in Manchester.
And then when I worked there too, you said mental illness. We had people show up to the shelter for a night, claim a bed. And we had one guy who said he walked up to us afterwards and he said, I'm leaving. And I said, why? And he said, because there's a tiny little man behind the wall and he won't stop screaming at me. And I'm like, okay, are you sure you don't want to stay, sir? It's very warm in here, middle of the winter. Are you sure you don't want to stay? And he was like, no, I'm sure, you're working for them. And then he leaves.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, yeah.
So, and it's on all different degrees with that. And, they're gonna be breaking into your cars and basement in the winters,
Mhm.
and it's costing a lot more to just let them run amok and
Yeah.
commit crimes and things like that, and then having to use all these resources to sweep up these camps every 2 seconds, and then people are just resupplying them with new tents and materials that it's coming out of someone's pocket.
Yeah.
And so we're wasting a lot of resources.
We are, because they come, they slash the tents, and then I come and I buy them new tents. So it's a waste of money. It's purposeless.
So yeah, I mean, I propose tent cities.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe have a few of them across Manchester, and there's already a tent checklist with the fire department. They have to be a certain distance apart, and then they have to be moved every 6 months. So there's already a infrastructure and regulation in place for these things. We just need to provide them an area, make sure that they're all spaced apart so they're not blowing each other up.
Absolutely.
Have some porta potties that actually get changed and everything, and then the trash that gets taken. And you won't have to worry, because that's another thing that I noticed. Whenever there was a site, they would have trash cans and stuff, and then the trash would be overflowing and all over the place, and then the media comes in.
Yeah.
And then they start taking pictures about trash everywhere and overflowing trash. Why isn't the city coming and changing these things and emptying them? Like, be a little bit proactive here. You're not it has to be done at some point. Why not do it before it gets out of control? But no, they want to turn it into a spectacle and be like, yeah, we gotta throw these homeless people into ovens.
Yeah.
Right? It's literally the thought process.
When friends would ask me, like Democrat friends would ask me, why wouldn't you vote for Joyce Craig, who's the major candidate? Right? I'm like, well, she gave a speech one time in Veterans Park, and she pushed the homeless out so she could have her speech there. And everybody was fine. They were there for the day, and then they got pushed out so that she could have a speech. I'm like, that to me is everything I need to know about her.
Yeah, I mean, they were just kicked out of the park completely.
Yeah. And I assume it was cleared for the day. Well, so for the protests you were talking about when they were by the courthouse, which is that same Veterans Park area, just a little bit farther up. After that big protest, huge demonstration, lots of people showing support, they were kicked out. I watched in horror the way that they stripped their tents. It's horrible to watch it actually happen. They just ended up having to move somewhere else. And then literally 3 months later, I'm at another event in another spot, and you get the same people. There are people who will come and they'll drive by, and they'll be mad at
yelling
people
at you,
supporting the homeless, right?
Oh yeah,
and they'll
I got
come
a lot
by,
of that.
and they'll be like, they'll say things about like, well, this guy broke into my car, like you said. This guy did some crime to my neighbor. Why would you help them out? I'm like, well, because after they get swept, they're gonna be in somebody else's neighborhood, and it's gonna be the same thing there again. It's really not solving anything. You're just pushing them around in circles, in the same city doing nothing to solve the root of the problem.
Yep, smearing it all around. And if we have 10 cities, there can be cameras and stuff just in
Mhm.
case anything happens. And
Mhm.
and it's more of a, you know, regulated, somewhat regulated. And then they could force people. You got to go to the camp. You could stay in the camp.
Mhm.
Let them come and go freely. And then you can send social workers down to these centralized areas
Mhm.
that have cameras. And because that's another problem, like during COVID, they were like, and before they would always say, we're afraid. Social workers are afraid to go down and talk to them. Remember? They'd
Mhm.
always say, oh, they're afraid to go to these camps and talk to them. But then when the vaccine came out,
Mhm.
they went down there and they vaccinated everybody.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so they got the job done when there was some profit for the pharmaceutical industry,
Mhm. So they're not afraid to do the vaccinations,
and
but they're
I'm
afraid
sure
to
they
help
got
them
they
in the
got
long
cut
run.
in for providing the service of the vaccine.
Mhm.
They got their little. They decided to sign them all up for health insurance and all that. They bill their insurance,
Right. Right.
right? So that's a big, big, big problem in the mental health and addiction field is
Mhm.
billing insurance. I
Okay.
never billed insurance. I didn't. That's not what I was doing. I was a peer-based system that I had,
Okay.
right? Peer support based, and so people had to pay their way.
Mhm.
You had to get a job,
Right.
or you had to fork over your disability, and a lot of them they didn't even have enough of their disability, wouldn't even cover the program fees.
Mhm.
And I'd be like, how are you going to survive in the world? What are you going to do? How are you going to get an apartment when this is cheaper than an apartment that you would get anywhere?
Mhm.
I charged $200 a week and then
Yeah.
160 if they
Mhm.
document. I had a Google Docs form that they would fill in, and I did this meeting and did that meeting, and they had to have a certain amount of credits each week to
Mhm.
get the fee reduction, right? And that would be 160 bucks. 20% fee reduction. That's
Yeah.
geez, I mean, the other sober houses are freaking 200, $300 a
Right. Yeah.
week. A
And
week.
some sober houses, depending on where you go, I don't know if this is the case in New Hampshire. Some of them they cater to wealthy clientele, and
Hmm.
some of them are
Hmm.
just flat out a scam.
Yes,
They
100%.
prey 100% on people who need help, who are looking for
They get the money.
rehabilitation.
What they do is they get, so I actually had an issue with this where I was going to open a second sober house on the west side of Manchester.
Hmm.
And so before, when sober houses started to boom, this money was just kind of being handed out willy nilly to all these sober houses to cover for people's recovery
Hmm.
services or rent or whatever, right?
Right.
And then they were sober house. They were people that were getting mad
Hmm.
that this random one-off sober house that this guy created is getting money, and
Okay.
that one is getting money. And
Hmm.
so they created a system where there's a voluntary sober house registry,
Hmm.
but you don't get any state or federal funding for your clients if you are not on the voluntary list.
Okay.
So it's a way of them funneling and then prohibiting people from getting registered and
Yeah.
on the list. And so they say that you pay us 200, and they charge a $275 non-refundable fee to evaluate your program.
Okay.
And so I paid the fee.
Keep the small guys out.
I,
Keep the established
I
guys
sent
in.
them the program contracts. I said, we want to open a female house over here.
Hmm.
Boom. We gave them the video tour and stuff because it was during COVID. So it was, they were doing like these video tours. And then they
Right.
came
Right.
by and they looked at it. They liked the property. It was a really nice property. And then they sent me an email and they were like, oh, well, we can't approve you unless because it was weird how they were wording it, but they were saying we can't approve you because you don't have a zero tolerance policy
Mm.
because you let people stay if they have a relapse or a slip up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I had a second chance protocol,
Yeah.
and the second chance protocol was if fail a UA,
Hmm.
your analysis, you get 2 weeks.
Okay.
You're on
Yeah.
restriction. You can't do
Hmm.
anything but go to meetings and go to a job,
Yeah.
if you have one.
And that's what a lot of advocates want
That's what they want.
is some more forgiveness because people do fall off the wagon and they shouldn't lose their place to live if they do.
And so they said, so how they have it set up with this system is
Hmm.
that they want you to kick them out
Hmm.
and send them to rehab,
Yeah.
which gets their insurance billed again. And so I
Hmm.
actually, there was a guy who, the second chance policy that I came up with originally, I was just, it was this one guy had like a bazillion chances,
Hmm.
right? And it got to the point where I was like, dude, we got to do something because you're literally just like using
Yeah.
constantly.
Yeah.
And so you need to go. So I send him to rehab.
Hmm.
He goes to, I said, you can come right back. So he goes to rehab and he calls me like 2 weeks in. He's like, oh,
Hmm.
they're kicking me out. I'm like, what? Why? What happened? He's like, oh, they said my insurance ran out. And I'm like, that doesn't sound right, dude.
Yeah.
You need to have, I said, I need to talk to somebody from the place.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. You
I'm like,
don't
I'm
trust
not
him
just
at
going to
this
listen to your
point. Yeah.
word.
Yeah.
No offense. But,
Hmm.
so I talked to the guy
Hmm.
and he's like, oh yeah, no, his insurance, because he was just in rehab like a year ago and he only had so much credits left. And so they
Oh
billed all
wow.
his, they sucked whatever they could out of it. And then
Yeah.
they're like, oh, you're gone. You're done. And they
Jesus.
kicked him back out. And so I did take him back and everything, but it's all about billing insurance.
Hmm.
So I was a peer support specialist. They didn't. There was no billing for that. The
Hmm.
only reason that the recovery and mental health community got involved and they wanted peer support specialists is because the state made a thing to where they could get licensed as a
Okay.
peer support specialist,
Hmm.
and then they could have bill insurance for them.
Okay.
I never got licensed,
Hmm.
so I couldn't have my insurance billed. I could have done that, but I didn't
Hmm.
want to go down that road because I saw the scam and the scheme of it all,
Hmm.
where it's just like your clinician meets up with you or the peer support specialist hangs out with you for an hour and shoots the shit, and then did they really even put in any effort, because the goal
Right.
is just to bill insurance and to see the clients
Hmm.
instead of actually help them.
It's professionalized, it's standardized, it's not human at that point.
It
It's
becomes, right, it's clinical,
yeah,
and it
exactly.
becomes mechanical, and then this just becomes billing for insurance. And oh, let's go, oh, we could use this vaccine to go and get money, and we
Hmm.
could get how or whatever we're going to get for it. Let's go down there and let's get the job done, when they couldn't do that for other reasons,
Hmm.
right? But they could do it for that. So whenever there's a financial incentive, um, you gotta look at it a little bit differently.
Hmm.
And so with the sober house thing, they basically refused to tell me. I said, I want you to tell me that I have to have a zero tolerance policy in my program,
Hmm.
or you won't, approve me,
Right.
or I want my $275 back.
Hmm.
And they were like, boom, they sent it immediately.
Mm.
They gave us the 275 back. And then I started to get threatening letters from DHHS
Okay.
saying that I was running an unlicensed facility.
Is that Health and Human Services?
Department of Health and Human Services started sending me these threatening letters. And I said, what? They said, we want to know, we think you're providing services. We want to know what services you're providing.
Hmm.
Services is a legally defined term. It means services that are billing insurance.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
provide services.
Hmm.
And facility is another legally defined term, which is a
Hmm.
licensed facility. So I was not running any sort of license. I didn't, I wasn't trying to do that. So I said, what, they wanted to know all my clients and his how much, everything about my business. I said, no, tell me what laws and administrative rules you think I'm violating,
Hmm.
and what services you think I'm providing that make me a facility
Hmm.
that I'm not doing. And then they refused. And then they took me to a hearing, because it was all these like, they were just threatening letters. It wasn't anything official.
Hmm.
Then they made it official, took me to a hearing. I represented myself 7 minutes. They didn't have any witnesses or anything. And the hearings officer said, you need to give him everything he's asking for and why you think he's running.
Wow.
And he's asking reasonable questions
Yeah. Yeah.
and you need to answer them. And they never did. And so it just went away. But that was also due to my COVID protesting and
Hmm.
things like that. and speaking out about the insurance billing schemes of the recovery industry and whatnot. So yeah, I made a lot of enemies along the way because of that.
Yeah. So I think that's all of the questions I had for you about your campaign. I did want to shout out your YouTube channel, Absolute Defiance, and your website, franknegusstaples.org, was it?
FrankNStaples.org. Yep.
franknstaples.org. Was there anything else you wanted to say before the end of the interview?
No, that's it. No, I appreciate you. It was a great interview. I think you asked a lot of thoughtful questions, nice back and forth. I hope some people do check out my policies that we didn't really get into because
Hmm.
they are very extensive, some of them, and then share them. Follow me on social media. I'm on X as well. I got the blue check mark. Frank Negus Staples. There's two Frank Negus Staples accounts. They're both mine. One has the blue check mark. It's the governor one. And then I'm on Facebook as well. Follow me there. Shoot me a message. Give me a call. Share my stuff. And I also, if you are on Facebook, I have an event on the
Hmm.
page that it's for the write-in. So it's for November 5th,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
to check respond, and that'll kind of give us an idea of how many people are going to be writing me in.
Hmm.
Um, you know, and so yeah, check that out. Respond to the event that you're going, or and then if you can, invite your friends.
Right. Right.
Invite your friends to the Facebook page, invite your friends to the event, share my stuff in a lot of these different groups that you're in, let people know that there is an alternative
Hmm.
candidate that can really, really shake things up.
Absolutely. Thank you for talking to me, and
Thank you
thank
so
you for coming
much.
on, man.
Awesome. Thank you.